I hope that the sound is through. I checked earlier and apparently it was. So
and then how we used it, and how we use that to then become public use case throughout the United States. And one thing that we had here was AOL Online, right? So America Online. And America Online was designed to be community based. How do we bring people together on this new solution, right? How do we utilize it for connectivity amongst different groups of people? And it then transpired to where it was the internet did not do that. And so why I bring that to the table is as Africa, as a continent, starts to build more infrastructure to support internet and AI-based solutions, we're at a cuffus. We're at a situation where if we don't build community-based narratives while this development is happening, the disconnection is going to continue to happen. And so one thing that I have been able to do is to really look at which countries are growing their internet infrastructure and really pay attention to what happens when the diaspora is going to connect to the continental African through internet. And what are we going to do together? How are we going to maximize collaborations? And so what I've been able to build and what I would love to share more of later throughout the conversation is how we are using 5 C's, which we've basically built into our methodology called connect, convene, collaborate, contribute, and convey. And that reciprocal cycle, how individuals, organizations, and communities can do that on a platform where we can learn from each other, find ways to contribute either financially, human capital, resources, whatever it may be, but do it with the community-based scenario with technology as an enabler, not as the solution. So I just wanted to share that because I remind myself of the time period that we struggled in as America with this great technology and did not maximize it to be useful for amongst the people. It became a very business-oriented solution, a governmental solution, a military solution, and not a people solution. And eventually we found that traction over time, right? But that's the only thing I wanted to share on the baseline of where I feel like I'm a little bit worried, but at the same time, I'm pragmatic. I really see the future of how this connectivity can really be great if we keep people at the center. The Nigerian engineer who has just got out of high school, how is he going to connect to a mentor and an advisor that might just be in the diaspora, but it is designed to connect each other versus keep the separation.
Super. Super. So Jean, you can pass it on to somebody.
I will pass it on to Vivek.
Hey, thank you, John. Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. I want to pick up on a couple of threads that have already been brought into the room because they connect deeply with what I have seen with my own mentorship work. Like Mark said, right? I mean, Africa is not just one story. When I mentor learners across, different African countries, either through African Agility or ADP list, right? The diversity of their realities is the first thing, you would, really feel. Someone in Lagos or Nairobi, right? I mean, they might have a strong mobile connectivity, while someone in northern Ghana or like rural Namibia, even for that matter, right, is fighting unstable electricity. And yet the creativity and determination across all those spaces remains the same. That's very interesting. One thing Mark said that stayed with me is like how mobile adoption let many African countries leapfrog the entire generations of technology. And I have seen the same potential with AI. Some of the young women who I mentor, right, I mean, they build entire projects on a single borrowed laptop or even on their phone. They figure things out with whatever they have. So the question for me is like, is Africa ready? It's more like what would progress look like if the tools were shaped around their lived realities from the start. And similarly with what now Taimosa had said, right? It really hit me because the importance of the context of it. I remember working with one young data analyst from Kenya who told me most of the tutorials don't look like my world, and she was right. A lot of AI and tech content is built from someone else's environment, someone else's culture, and someone else assumed infrastructure. What Temoso described with the teachers in Ghana is exactly the same challenge. Technology often arrives uncontextualized, right? I mean, and also to unanchored to the local needs as well. I have seen students blame themselves when the problem was never their ability. It was the tools weren't speaking the language literally or culturally, right? And thank you, John, for your insights. I mean, regarding your community, right? He mentioned AOL. I come from the other side of the United States. I live in the East Coast, John. And how early internet in the US worked because of its community-based themes, right? And honestly, that mirrors what I have seen across Africa than anything. Learning happens in WhatsApp groups, in hub spaces, in telegrams, in small mentorship circles where people uplift each other. They try to boost them, cheer them up. And if we build AI and digital ecosystems without preserving that sense of community, we risk creating tools that are technically powerful but humanly disconnected. So for me, tying this all together brings back to what Michael said, right? Who is in the driver's seat really? Because the way I see it, Africa is already driving in spirit, through its ingenuity, through its resilience, and through collaboration. But in practice, many of the tools, platform, and policy frameworks are still being in the driven from someone else's perspective. This creates a mismatch between what we have as a talent and what opportunities we could provide to them. What gives me hopes is seeing like how fast things are changing once the ownership shifts locally. So if I had to add like one thing to this conversation, like Africa doesn't need to wait for invited to be into the driver's seat. The innovation is already happening. I'm interested to listen other perspective now. Thank you.
Super. Vivek, I see a hand. That is Liz. Maybe you can pass it to Liz. And then
Yeah,
after Liz, I have a thought I would like to share, maybe to to add a little bit of color to our conversation, and then we can continue.
sure, Michael. Passing on
Right.
to Liz.
All right. Liz, the floor is yours.
She looks frozen.
Can you guys see me?
Yeah,
Hello.
you're good now.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. My internet always chooses the worst times. Okay, so I really appreciate all the opinions. I actually have some few notes I want to share as well. To go back to your question around who should be in the driver's seat, where are the collaborators, and where's the collaboration happening, and how does it look like for us to be in the front seat, right? So whoever should be in the driver's seat, just to go back to the car analogy, should be the person that's got the most vested interest, right? And has the passion and the ability to lead the people that are in the backseat, right? So if the people in the backseat are Africans, then the people that should be in the driver's seat should be someone who's got a vested interest in the people in the back and in themselves, right? So when we look at Africa as a whole, I think that we understand it from if we look at who's to blame, etc., and even just Africans in general, at the heart of who we are is that we're farmers, right? If you look at our history, we've just been people that are community-based. We're okay with the basics because we had a lot. We had abundance. We've got a land of abundance. So we never thought to build airplanes or aircraft to travel anyway because we had everything we needed, right? And so innovation is something, and even just like the Industrial Revolution was something was placed on us. And so we've always had to evolve ever since then. So we're working from the understanding of not that Africans are not innovative in mind, but it's just circumstantially and historically we never really had to be. And now that we're competing with the world, we have to be. So if we come from that perspective of our background, we look at what is there now. So we have folks that are obviously ahead of us. Why? Because they've advanced technologically that way. Back to Vivek's point around community. So then the question becomes, do we have the tools that are necessary and available? And if so, why not? I believe that the reason why we don't have some of the tools that we have is because there is a lack of investment. We've got a national budget per country. You can only associate a certain percentage to certain things. And when we do invest, the investments that we get from funding, just speaking from a policy perspective, because I'm a policy student, the funding that we get for programs is tied to maybe some sort of rules, right, from donors, from private donors. So, for example, if they say, oh, we want to invest 5% of our national budget into education, but with these strings attached, right? So you have to include this system, you have to include that system. So we must understand that with the funding that we get, there are rules and boundaries in place. So that's the second point. So how much are we actually allocating to innovation within a country? And then when we look at the allocated budget within, I'm going top down. So if we look at the allocated budget, then we have to talk about where it actually does go to infrastructure. What happens then? Our African tools, because we have thousands of graduates in universities that are computer science majors, that are engineering majors. So we have skilled people. It's not that we don't have skilled people, right? But these skilled people are being overlooked. And that's really a general, I want to say, cultural problem in terms of trust for each other and trust for our outputs. And they're lacking opportunities, and the opportunities are being given to external parties, right? So that's one thing we need to fix. How does that look like? If the government is then able to maybe have a platform where we vote on who gets the tenders, who gets the contracts, how is our Africa being built? And this is a citizen voice and not just a government-based voice. I think that would change the narrative a lot, right? Because we issue funding and we issue opportunities based on who you know versus what you know. And I think that if that dynamic shifts, then we can then actually understand, because there's a lot of people building a lot of things, right? So I've been to multiple conferences, spoken to multiple startups across Africa. People are doing great things. They're just not being recognized for it. And so you might be under the impression that Africans are now building tools that are similar to ChatGPT. And by the way, all these tools, as a data scientist, I must tell you, they're not very impressive to some of us, because all it is just large data, large infrastructure. It's the same old stuff from history, right? So the reason why we didn't build the ChatGPT is because we don't have the infrastructure necessarily, right? We don't have the powerful infrastructure to build it. So the question then becomes, do we then allocate funding towards, infrastructure, data centers, local data centers? We're able to then give to our talented students to build these kinds of models. And the answer for me is yes. So I think, number one, it should be in terms of the research that surfaces and says, well, if we keep giving opportunities to exopart, this is the impact it's going to have economically on the country, and therefore we should probably invest in our youth. And if we surface that kind of research, if we continue to trust our people and just continue to invest in them, then honestly, we'll reach the goals we want to reach. And that's the gap that I see. I'm going to pass it on to someone at the end up. Was it Paul?
Yeah, Prof. Hey, Prof, before you go, let me add a little bit to this, and then you can continue. I thought so. One of the things that I think is glaringly true about Africa is education, right? It's our education system. So, Africans are very thirsty about education, but education systems are based on constructs from elsewhere. So advances and access to technology that we're talking about today in any space never happen in the absence of education. So this topic what we are on right now, I think should be anchored, is always anchored on education, and it's enriched by education, right? So in Africa today, this is across Africa. In our education systems, we still describe our educations in terms of, our education system is the British system, or is the American system, or is the French system. That's true. That's true I would say, I don't know how it is in South Africa, but that's how we describe. I've traveled around Africa and I hear that quite a bit. Oh, it's the British system, it's the American system. So, think about the soul of the continent, generations upon generations, since independence, still have a point of reference to our education for our children, that is still based somewhere else, like Vivek was saying in terms of technology. So now here is my opinion. Now this is pure Michael's opinion, nothing empirical, nothing, not a construct. So I don't think a society, any society truly thrives on a strong foundation when its educational system is anchored in values that are not authentic to it, whether they're cultural, spiritual, ecological, whatever, right? So I believe you can borrow methods, you can borrow tools, but you cannot outsource that soul. I always look at the Asian education systems as reflecting what I think it should be. So the education systems are anchored on what's local to them, and then they pick good stuff from elsewhere, right? But the education system is anchored on them. So anyway, the question that I would like to pose to enrich our earlier conversation, Prof, is in your spaces, in your universities, in your context, where do you see education reflecting education? And you can bias it on the discussion on technology. Where do you see education reflecting those inherited values that are local? Like Mark was saying, Africa is so diverse. It's diverse at a country level. It's diverse within the country. So where do you see education, especially technology education and collaboration around education, anchored on those inherited values? Um, Prof, you can go.
Yeah, thank you very much for raising that issue of education. In my experience, it's not a straightforward issue that the education that is being largely implemented across the continent is a foreign education. Sometimes I look at it from the perspective that it is not complete in delivering value. And what I mean by that is that even if you took the British education or the French education, it's designed and implemented and has evolved over time to deliver value to that society. So the greatest challenge I think I find in our education system is that we haven't spent enough time and probably we don't have sometimes the right environment to discuss that issue of delivering value, so that when we have somebody who is graduating from our institutions, then they basically are able to contribute to the society, they're able to create wealth, they're able to be employed, and so on. There has to be clarity on that. And sometimes that also means looking at education in a very holistic way. If we implement an education system and at the end of the day, there is still the issue of, will this person go and work in Europe? Will this person qualify to go and work in US? Will this person qualify to go and continue studies in Australia or Malaysia? We start losing it because we then don't have the full freedom. And that also speaks to the other aspect, whether in designing the new education system, and you keep doing that all the time, we have the confidence to see them through, confidence that we have come up with something new, and that new will translate to contributing and transforming the society. What I find, or what I have found in my experience, is a disconnect. So in the running of the university, because I have been involved in starting a university and in a way having a big say as the vice chancellor on what the curriculum should be and how we can then make our education more relevant to our environment. We had, for example, to introduce a minor degree essentially on African studies, trying to root our students in our knowledge, in the indigenous knowledge, in the value system, and so on. And in a way that has worked well. But what we find across the continent is that sometimes you don't have enough number of people who are willing to engage in this discussion. And even when they engage in the discussion, we have very few people implementing. So we are now actually, as we speak now, we've partnered with one of the colleagues. Maybe you may know him. He has written a lot of books, Professor Chakaneste Mavunga. He's a professor of science, technology, and society at MIT. So we are experimenting with new ways of educating university students, not just university students, even high school students on a pilot basis, students in the TVET, students in the universities, in a way that we start bringing down the barriers between the classroom and the society. But what we find all the time is that we are talking about these things that we are not actually doing them. So the challenge is, can we then have people who are willing to do this and so on? Having said that, there is something very also specific about technology. When we talk about technology, and I raised this at the beginning, is that we talk about the software today. If you go to the history of AI, the AI work started in the 1980s. So the rest of the world, quite a number of people who have been in that space have actually been developing the AI systems for almost 3 decades. And we are joining at this point, basically to only use the tools that have been developed. So we are coming in and using, creating things, at a layer where there are so many other layers that we are not in control of. So when you talk about being the driver's seat, I think is a very important question, and I feel like it's something we need to interrogate a little further and figure out how first of all to recognize the gap, and then upon recognize the gap, asking how does that fit in our society, and how do we fit in all those things. So I'll quickly maybe bring to one other issue
Mhm.
as we talk about that, so I can give it to somebody else, that we are looking at also, and this part is forgotten, the hardware side. We are forgetting the hardware side. And I want to share the statistics on the hardware side that as we speak, Africa, the semiconductor, just the chips that are going to the GPUs, that are going to the devices, the global value of that market is 700 billion. The Africa's contribution to that market is 0.1%. 700 billion, we are contributing, we are 0.1%. Against the material that go into making those things, 65% of them come from Africa in terms of value. 65%. But our value contribution is only 1%. If you go further and look at the electronic industry, which creates all these devices, is a market of 4 trillion, sorry. $4 trillion. Africa's contribution in terms of value, less than 2%. So when you ask who is in the driver's seat, we have the 65% contribution in terms of the mineral resources. So we have the last 2 days, yesterday and Thursday, we had another meeting convened in South Africa to discuss how we can contribute more to the semiconductor industry so that we can get more value and start having a bit of sovereignty. And you have seen the wars. People can deny us the devices that we need to use these things. So what is lacking, again, is what you are saying. Who is in the driver's seat? The question is, who do we need to tell us to move into this industry? The reason why I came to this forum, I was invited by Kibari, and I was invited because we were discussing how to get into this industry and start contributing to the device development. So that is still a discussion I would like to also us to have. Finally, so that I leave this, about the digital divide, my university is in a rural area, but as we developed it, we came up with enough strategies to make sure that all the students had access to devices and so on. But after I retired as a vice chancellor, then I'm now leading this Origin Research and Innovation initiative. And we decided we can equip some of the schools there with computer and internet. This is something based on the origin. What surprised me is that you can live, we talk of the digital divide, and we think of it as north-south, but we fail to recognize the digital divide that is in our midst. We visited a couple of schools, and we were very surprised to realize that schools that are expected to be using computers have a ratio of 1 to 10. In other words, they expose only 10% of their students to the computer studies. Only 10%. And these are very good schools. We found schools, secondary schools, where the principal does not even have a computer. So in other words, everybody in that institution, the students and people, they can be there without ever touching a computer, not touching one, because they are not there. So, and so we can have these discussions. But until we go down to the communities and start to address the needs at that level, and start to figure out what kind of solutions we should be coming with to close that very big gap, then you leave very, very, very many people behind. And we actually concluded, well, this Silicon Valley we probably talk about, you may have heard about it, is a city talk. The real world is not like that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Prof. So I see two hands. We have about 12 minutes to go. So let's make sure that we hear all voices. So Winfred, do you want to go, and then or Jocelyn, one of you can go. And then we still would like to hear from Paul and Joy as well.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Joylene Tasamu, and I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm an ICT and AI strategist. Been in the industry for over 25 years. I've worked with the marginalized communities in bridging the digital divide and ensuring that there's access to technologies, the internet, and also education in terms of internet and computer penetration in our country, South Africa. I've worked a lot with the Kruger National Park, where I raised funding for the communities that are marginalized in that place, ensuring that they gain access to computers and also internet access and are able to use technologies for community development and also enterprise development. Currently, I'm working with the corporates and government as well as communities, which is my great passion, in ensuring that they understand what is artificial intelligence and how can we leverage artificial intelligence for career development, personal development, and also entrepreneurship. So I'd like to contribute to the question where you asked who should lead and take the discussion or the implementation further. In my own understanding, it's us as Africans. As an African, I'm so proud to take leadership also as a woman in ensuring that we have technology and access to internet and technology services in every community. Last month, I had a discussion, in Victoria Falls, where I was talking on artificial intelligence for the healthcare, and someone asked me a question, how are you dealing with equity when it comes to AI and ICT? So I think this kind of platform is beautiful because we are from different countries, different continents, and we are talking about collaboration. I see people, in America and all those some parts of the world where we can work together. This is about collaboration for technology development and access. So us in South Africa, I run a company called Maru Cyber Connect. where we assist communities to come on board, and also ensuring that marginalized communities are tapping into the economic opportunities that are available through the use of artificial intelligence and technology. So on this platform, I would like to us to talk about how can we collaborate. Yes, we have the skills. Here in South Africa, we have the skills. But when we talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of people are still scared. They think when artificial intelligence comes, my job is gone, I become redundant. But we're saying that artificial intelligence is not replacing your job, but it is replacing inefficiencies. And it is the one who knows how to use artificial intelligence who remain relevant in today's world. So how can we take this message further? How can we use lessons learned in America, in Ghana, in Kenya, and from all over the world to ensure that we build robust systems? As a non-profit organization, we used to be funded by USAID, but we all know that that funding has stopped. And now that has greatly affected the work that we do in our communities. So on this platform, maybe someone knows how we can leverage financial resources so that the work is not disadvantaged. We've implemented computer centers, computer labs, but now without financial support, they become redundant. Yes, we can offer our skills, we can do some things for free, but at the end of the day, your fuel needs to be paid for. That time needs to be paid for. The expert you are bringing in need to be paid for. So how can we meet those financial requirements to ensure that we continue to bring in our communities, the women and marginalized persons, to be a part of the discussion that we have today? So I'm super excited to be part of this dialogue, and I believe that we are going to maybe exchange contacts, maybe create a WhatsApp group so that we can take the discussion further. Someone spoke about how can we create our own chat GPT. We are developing GPTs. It's something that we are already teaching communities. So we can sit here and say, how do we develop GPTs? I have developed GPTs. How can we do that? How can we get more people to be involved in developing GPTs, AI assistants, chatbots, and those kind of things, so that we make the work easy, we automate processes, and we become, champions of ICTs and AI in Africa and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jolene. To me, the operative word there is collaboration. So we're talking about all these things that we can do together, that we need to solve. And I think collaboration simplifies it, really, really simplifies it. Hey, Winfred, do you want to go quick? I know we have about probably how many minutes now? 6 minutes to go. And then if Peter and Joy would like to say something after you, that would be super. Winfred, go ahead, please.
Hello, good evening, everyone. This is Winfred Kerrie. I'm a researcher, a freelancer, an entrepreneur. Right now, I work as an AI backend engineer, working for a company in San Francisco. And when Paul was talking, he mentioned about how we are not contributing in terms of hardware and let's say working with semiconductors. And it made me remember something that I saw being discussed on Reddit. And someone was saying that they want to be a semiconductor engineer. And people are mocking him. They were asking him, who is going to employ you? Because Safaricom is not going to give you a job. You're from Kenya. They don't trust you. They don't think you can do much. And then now there is the other side of the coin, where people who are hiring from outside Africa, they don't understand that Africans have adapted. They still think our education system, even though it's based on British, American, and all that, is up to par. So you find people who are hiring are told that you can find someone remote, but let's not be from Africa. And this is from someone who does hire was telling us this. So I believe that we should start talking about how, first of all, our education system is not set up for Kenya, actually, for Africa, actually, because the way education came to be, it was so fast-paced. Like we came from learning from our parents, grandmothers, grandparents. They teaching us how to go about in the community. And then education was introduced, education that is where you are told that, work hard, learn so that you can be employed. And Africans adapted. We went to school, we learned. But then when you graduate, you find the jobs available are not enough because our economic development is not there yet to accommodate everyone who is graduating right now. And then when it comes to like people who are hiring from outside right now, in most, like a few years ago, you could find someone getting a job as a software developer entry job in companies outside Africa because, the demand for those skills was high. So they were starting to look into like what Africa can offer. But now AI is now in the picture. So the jobs that Africans could have gotten, you find people like the founders of ALX, they were saying that Africa is going to produce the highest working population in the next few decades. But those jobs are disappearing, whether we want to admit it or not. Where the way we used to think about jobs is changing. And like right now, I work as a backend developer, but what we are creating is a coding agent. So technically, I'm replacing myself because when it's done, when it's out there, people are not going to hire me to code. The agent is working so well. So I think as we talk about collaboration, I think maybe we start talking about how our education system is set up. And I believe Africa is at an advantage because, yes, it is whether British, American education system, but it has never been stable. It keeps changing. In Kenya, it was changed like a few years ago. Now we are using a different education system. That means we can adapt, we are able to, and it's flexible enough. So I was talking to someone the other day about, I used to work in academia a lot. So we were discussing how the industry has changed.
Hey, Winfred, we have about barely 2 minutes. If you could wrap up, and then hopefully Peter can chime in before we finally close. Thank you.
Okay. So I was saying we were discussing about how academia education field is changing. And we started talking about how in America, British, they use Turnitin a lot to check for plagiarism and AI-generated content, which is very funny when you think about it. Because right now, someone can just write a whole essay and it will be flagged as AI because, has been trained with academic papers and all that. And we were saying in Africa, we don't actually check for these things right now. Some people are just submitting AI-generated content. We are not checking, but we're just accepting it. So I think education system now need to change with like understanding that students are using AI and we should not be regulating this. We should actually be taking this as an advantage. That is why we base now our education system, and we can be sure that in the next 10 years, we're going to be far from where we are now, and we'll stop worrying about how AI is going to replace us. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so glad to be part of this discussion.
Thank you so much, Winfred. Timosa, I think we have to wrap up. It looks like we have just a few seconds left. As I reached out to Robin for transcription. She hasn't responded yet, so we can find out from on the other end.
Yeah. Well, I did request it, so hopefully it's captured somewhere. I just can't copy it.